what advice do you have for somebody that is trying to change the way they manage their stress and start to heal from some of these wounds that they have so that their overall health can improve?
Well, my general sense is that illnesses and symptoms come along as the body's way of saying no, because you're not, saying no to a stressful situation, to a relationship which isn't working, to a job is not good for you. So in a new book, I talk about before the body says no, just check in with yourself regularly. What am I not saying no to? What am I taking on that I don't really want to? And why don't I say no? Like a simple thing. I'm in Baltimore and I call you up and, hey, do you want to go for coffee? But you're tired. You haven't slept all night. You don't want to go for coffee. But you say yes because you don't know how to say no because you're afraid that I won't like you or that you owe it to me or something. So you say yes. Well, if you chronically do that, what's the impact on you? The impact is you're always going to be tired and you're going to be resentful. And so I ask people, ask themselves, where am I not saying no? Or there's a no that wants to be said, but you're not saying it. And what's the belief that has you not saying no? So if I ask you to go out for coffee, even though you don't feel like it, you don't even like coffee, you're tired, you have other things to do, but you say, yes, I will. There's a story behind that. The story behind it, it's my responsibility to feel Gabor feel good. In other words, you're taking responsibility for my emotional states. Well, that's the story. Where did you learn that? Oh, I learned that when I was a kid, when I was made to take responsibility for how my parents felt. So there's some very simple ways. The key dynamic for me are people being authentic. Are they being true to themselves? The less true we are to ourselves, the more sick we get. And I know people with multiple sclerosis and rheumatoid arthritis, and I talk about this in the book, who when they get a flare up, instead of panicking and running to the doctor, they say, oh, what is this trying to tell me right now? And they actually use the disease as their teacher of how was I not being authentic? They may or may not take medication. I'm not, of course, as a physician, I'm not against medications. But in addition to that, they do an inventory. How was that not being authentic? What stresses did I take on? And they find that the more they understand that, the milder their illness becomes. Because once they learn how to say no, the body doesn't have to.
I think the example that you used with me and like us getting coffee goes back to something I know you talk about in the book, which is like the importance of remaining authentic to yourself. And when you're out of alignment with that, it can often lead to a variety of problems in people's lives. But there's also this other thing that exists in that dance with authenticity, which is attachment. And we kind of need both. And I think sometimes people struggle in that they completely lose themselves to fit in with other crowds, to fit in with other people, to mold into that relationship, to feel attached. Or the other way is they just remain so hard headed that they don't want to like compromise or embrace any change to be part of a group. So what's your advice to have for people to have a healthy relationship with attachment while remaining authentic?
So you're quite right. As human beings, we need contact and connection. That's our nature. The capitalist myth that we're individualistic, aggressive, competitive, selfish creatures is got nothing to do with reality. How we evolved over millions of years, whereas collaborative communal creatures. And so we have a need for attachment. And quite apart from that, the young child and the infant cannot even live in the absence of attachment. I mean, no child, no bear cub, no puppy dog, no kitten, no baby penguin can survive without attachment relationship with adults because we need them to nourish us, to protect us, to keep us warm, and so on. So in childhood, the need for attachment is absolutely non-negotiable. But as you imply, we also have the need to be ourselves. Now, the need to be ourselves is also a survival need, by the way, because what does it mean to be ourselves, to be authentic? It means to be in touch with our feelings and to be able to act on them. Now, out there in nature, where we evolved for millions of years, how long do you survive if you're not in touch with your gut feelings?
Not very long.
Not very long. So that authenticity is not a luxury. It's also built in need. But what happens to a small child where Let's say they have experienced anger because they're 2 years old and are frustrated, so they're angry. But mom and dad, oh, angry, get away from us, time out. Now the child's brain has a decision to make. I could be authentic and experience my anger and lose my attachment relationship, or I can fit into the attachment relationship by suppressing part of who I am, give up my authenticity. Now, in every case, the child is not a choice. The attachment is absolute. So the child will be pushed on parts of themselves, their authenticity. They lose contact with themselves. The essence of trauma is loss of contact with yourself. Then we spend all our lives. So now, as an adult, we still have a fear of authenticity because if we're authentic, we might lose our attachments. The difference is that you and I and our listeners, as adults, are no longer children. It's no longer such a tragic dilemma. So if I call you up for coffee and you say no, I might say, I don't want to talk to Doug ever again. But you can survive, can't you? You don't need that attachment relationship with me anymore. You need the authenticity much more than you need me. But if you're still running along the program that you developed as a child, you will suppress yourself. Oh, if I say no, Gabor won't like me. And so you suppress your own authentic impulse in order to be accepted and attached to with me. A lot of people face that problem. And all I can say is it's a painful one. Because if you're going to be authentic, you might lose some relationships. But the question is, who would you rather have? An authentic relationship with yourself or an inauthentic relationship with others? And basically, the good news is that the more authentic you become, the more you'll find relationships that can respect that authenticity. So you're not going to be left all alone. But it can be painful at times in this society where we're all expected to be other than who we are.
I know one of the things that you talk about in your book, The Myth of Normal, is that people, when they can't manage their stress or manage their emotions, it ends up like playing out in their physical health and in their biology. Like, if you could explain that, I think people would really appreciate it.
The first thing is I just want to reinforce your comment that recognizing the original source of things is not the same as working through. Yeah, I know what happened to me as a 1 year old. I was given to the stranger and all that. But knowing that intellectually and coming to a state of self acceptance and self love are not the same thing. I just want to emphasize the importance of what you said there. Now, in terms of the question about, here's the thing that as a physician, I've had to recognize over time because nobody taught it to me in medical school. And here's the problem that's almost, people find it hard to grasp this truth. Ancient wisdom has always known that the mind and the body can't be separated, that what happens emotionally has an impact physiologically. Traditional wisdom, traditional medicinal practices have always known that. Not only has traditional wisdom always known that, modern science has proved it over and over and over again. It's thousands of research papers now, multiple thousands, showing the unity of mind and body, that when emotional factors play up in a person's life, that'll have an impact on their physiology. But unfortunately, neither the ancient wisdom nor the modern science is taught in medical schools. So most physicians get educated into a view of health that separates the mind from the body. This is in the face of all the evidence. Now we can talk about why, but that's just how it is. So that means when I'm lecturing to several hundred people, I'll ask them, in the last 5 years, have you been to a gastroenterologist, a neurologist, a cardiologist, a rheumatologist, an immunologist, endocrinologist, any kind of an ologist? Put your hand up. Well, many people will put their hands up. Then I'll say, keep your hand up if they ask you about childhood trauma, if they ask you about how you feel about yourself as a human being, if they ask you about stresses on the job, if they ask you about stresses in your relationship. Almost no hands stay up. And yet those factors of stress and trauma have everything to do why most people have to go to doctors with their diseases, because a lot of chronic illnesses, not all of them, but a lot of chronic illnesses are actually rooted in emotional dynamics based in childhood trauma. And again, that sounds like a mouthful, and this guy's making some wild statement. All I can tell you is that there's a whole raft of medical evidence for that. In fact, there's no evidence showing the other way. So that the emotional centers in the brain are part of the same apparatus that manufactures hormones, runs the immune system, the nervous system, and the gut. And there's a whole new science that studies the multiple connections between these various parts of that unitary system. So naturally, when you're emotionally repressed, emotionally traumatized, that's going to have an impact on your physiology. So when I deal with people with chronic illnesses, I don't just try and deal with the physical symptoms or deal with the medications they might need, but also what's going on for them emotionally. Because as people emotionally heal, very often their diseases can get better naturally, which is what you expect.
Yeah. I've definitely noticed that when I'm super stressed out or I've been in a relationship that wasn't serving me, I've just seen it play out, not just my mental health, my physical health too, where you almost get sick and you like take your temperature and you have no temperature. And this is again, this is all like anecdotal. This is just my experience. You take your temperature, no temperature. You could go to the doctor and they ask you if you have something going on, and you're like telling them your symptoms, but they don't find anything. And it comes back to just being just super like stressed out. And I'm fortunate that I've been able to get on the other side of that and establish some healthier coping mechanisms when I hit adversity, because adversity is always going to come. So that way I don't downward spiral. But there's a lot of people, Dr. Mate, that don't, because it's challenging when things are stressful and you're emotional to learn and engage in new healthy coping mechanisms